Hello, my name's Bonte, Richard Bonte, and this is Curmudgeonly Yours, a show on Society Bites Radio, part of the Radio Ear Network family, supplying social interaction for the mind and soul. The introductory and concluding music to this show is La Polonaise by Wieniawski, played by Max Bonte. I am your host and curmudgeon, where everything is what it seems. Nothing is what it seems. And what is not said is often of most interest. Today I'll be reading Chapter 1 from my legal financial thriller novel, Terry's Upside, a work of fiction based on a true story. I'll also be reading Chapters 1 and 2 from another one of my novels, The BAJA Redemption, a politico-religious road story co-written with James Crew Allen. Curmudgeonly Yours is an eclectic show on comparative modern Western life. The title comes from my humorous book of the same name, Curmudgeonly Yours. In this sometimes multilingual show, I interview guests from all over to get their take on ideas and problems facing the Western world. I am a Bradenton resident and a native-born New Yorker. I have lived much of my life in Canada, California, and Western Europe. I've worn many hats, including playwright, actor, teacher, writer, linguist, and phonetician. I have advanced degrees from Berkeley, UCLA, and the Sorbonne. I have written or co-written 10 novels, including Curmudgeonly Yours, 2017, being given the Florida Authors and Publishers Association 2018 Silver Award for Humor. Several short stories, plays, and screenplays. I am right now co-writing a new science fiction love story set in modern-day Florida. Terry's Upside is about a good family man who is pushed to the edge when an evil cousin takes advantage of him. The story goes like this. When American teacher Rod LaFleur is visited one day in Paris by cousin Teresa from New York, he doesn't know what to think. For one thing, he hardly knows Terry. For another, Terry has always ranted on about harebrained schemes and pots of gold, about this or that one being greedy or not getting their fair share of the family pie, a privately held, well-known plastic toy company in the Midwest. Sure, Rod and his extended family have inherited gift shares from the Allen Company, but they have no decision-making power, and the shares are worth nothing on the open market. Terry has a new spin, and the LaFleurs are willing listeners until they find out that the option contract they sign is not what they thought it would be, nor is Terry exactly who she claims to be. Suddenly, the LaFleurs are plunged into a world they've never experienced, of options and shares, stocks and bonds, and ironclad contracts drawn up by well-paid lawyers and shysters. Will Rod be able to save his family from the clutches of the evil Terry and his own greedy sister-in-law? Will Rod be able to save himself? So here's the reading from Terry's Upside, Part 1, the setup. Chapter 1, Hook. He'd always been afraid of looking down from anything, no matter how low it was. This was because he'd imagined himself hurtling forward over the brink and smashing onto the hard surface below with a loud splat. And as he looked down now, he imagined a woman's willowy body gently hitting water and being taken under by the toe of the waves. He shook his head, slammed the window shut, and sat down heavily. A peal of laughter from below made him jump up and walk about in circles as he tried to adjust his breathing, but then he thrust both hands deep into his pockets and held his thighs protectively as he started panting anew. "Rod, you coming down for breakfast?" "Be right down, hun," he managed to yell in as natural a tone as he could muster. Really, what other choice did he have but to meet her? It would have been rude not to do so. He hadn't kept up with his and Terry's extended family for years. In a way, she was a convenient go-between, even though he didn't know her very well, and she'd been the only person who seemed to care when he was forced to make a major decision about the company's cheapo stock redemption plan in the early 90s. Not only did she call him at the time, but she also came to see him in Santa Barbara, explaining that she, like he, was a minority stockholder and subject to the whims of an impressive management. She was a caring businesswoman, a compassionate person who could sympathize with the minority stockholder and would treat his every dollar as if it were her own. And she was attractive, too. In her late 40s, an old ballsy, her Jewish chutzpah covering up the true, vulnerable nature he knew lay beneath. But why did he view their future meeting with such trepidation? Was it the fact she hadn't even bothered to say hello, or rather, who's this, when he'd answered the phone? Wasn't that Rod's prerogative to ask, not hers? Especially as it must have been 1:30 a.m. her time in New York. And then she talked about getting some culture, as if it was something to be purchased on the Champs-Élysées, or doing Paris in one day, as if the City of Lights was a power lunch you could gulp down with water. Then she prattled on about joining her kids who were knocking off a ski trip to Chamonix in the French Alps. Rod jumped as his wife, Tina, walked in, a pink dressing gown, a white towel packed atop her red hair. "Who was that?" she asked suspiciously. "Terry Roberts." "Terry who?" "AC's niece. She called me a year ago." "Oh, her. What does she want now?" "That's a good question, and I'd like to thank myself for asking it." Her teeth smiled at him, but her eyes were searching seriously for an answer. "Probably wants to talk about the Allens just like last time." "Well, that's good. You've got a flair for the obvious today." "Last time I heard from her was last spring. She has a 1-hour conversation with me, and then I don't hear from her until today, when she tells me in 1 minute that she's coming over to France to chat with us." "I wouldn't worry about it, but we can talk it over breakfast if you want. I'll go make some coffee. Anna's got to go to school. Oh, and hang up that phone, will you?" Rod stared wild-eyed as she left the room, his hair in points from where he was still pulling it. He kicked at the droning portable receiver, finally shutting it off. Then he began picking at his nails, but decided a nail clipper would be better as he thought back to only 3 years earlier. They were living in Santa Barbara, snuggled into a gated community, only 5 minutes from the beach. There were 100-plus condominiums, and they shared 3 tennis courts, a pool, a hot tub, and a weight room. And to get to them, one only had to stroll along bougainvillea-lined paths protected from the sun by sycamore trees. A gust of wind suddenly blew open the French windows looking out onto the street. Hordes of people were marching along to the sound of car horns and a fast-approaching siren. Rod quickly closed the windows to return to his daydream. "Rod, what are you doing up there? It's time for breakfast." Rod found himself still staring at the portable receiver. As he put on his bathrobe and slippers and ambled down to eat, he thought about how 5 years earlier, he had been making $10 an hour, and this with a doctorate, no less. And now, in his late 40s, he was making 200 francs, or the equivalent of $30 an hour, for teaching English drama to foreigners. He thought about his extensive university training, his knowledge of several foreign languages, the huge cost of this education and time, and lost earning potential, all the different jobs he had sown and done, both menial and research-oriented, as well as his general, also no-reap type of life. And when he looked into the mirror, into his own soul, he would actually ask himself, what have I reaped? No one could say he had set the world on fire. That's the end of Chapter 1 of Terry's Upside. The second reading is from The BAJA Redemption, written by Richard Bonte with James Crew Allen. It posits the possibility of a second promised land. The BAJA Redemption is a fast-paced road thriller which seeks a radical solution to the one promised land, one Israel theory. Set against the current climate of nuclear war between the USA and Israel with Iran, 2 academics attempt to transport Moses' newly discovered 10 Commandments tablet from Baja California to the White House. Powerful forces within the 3 countries also want the tablet. They don't want a new promised land. They don't even want Israel's relocation. They want its destruction. Then there is the Australian hedge fund billionaire who's playing all sides against the middle. The President of the United States and her secret protectors covertly aligned with the academics against the war hawks. Within a tight time frame, there is a deadly cross-country race to deliver the tablet to the president. If the academics succeed, they will have avoided nuclear war. If they don't, well, now I'm going to start reading the chapters 1 and 2 of the BAJA Redemption. Part 1, the 3 nuclear clocks. Chapter 1, the 3 nuclear clocks. December 6, 6 a.m. A homeless man stretched and scratched himself all over as he crawled out of his sleeping bag. He unstuck his clothes from his nether areas, adjusted his crotch, blew his nose, and then rubbed the sleep granules away from his eyes. He warmed his hands over the hot air vent he had found wandering around the night before near the White House. Camped out on Washington, D.C.'s fashionable Constitution Avenue, he squinted through the foggy darkness into the brightly lit Toys for Boys store window. The window, like the store itself, was divided into 2 sections, the left side and the right side. The left side was packed with items and contained all manner of Christmas gifts, including a full range of miniature firearms for young boys arranged carefully around a nativity scene. This is a strange store, he thought. The right side was completely empty except for 3 large, black, plastic clocks sitting on top of 3 flat-screen TV monitors on a big shelf. There was a neatly printed sign under the shelf reading, "The 3 nuclear clocks." Underneath each clock and monitor, the time was given in Iran, Israel, and the United States. Tehran, 2:30 p.m., Tel Aviv, 1 p.m., and Washington, D.C., 6 a.m. One per monitor, 3 grim-looking men, speaking over each other, were delivering the same news in an endless loop in 3 different languages: Farsi, Hebrew, and English. We never thought we'd be signing our own, let alone be using the expression final solution. But in the wake of the decisions taken lately by Tehran, Tel Aviv, and Washington, we really have no choice. The only thing that could delay fate is successfully hunting down the 2 terrorists who might have the key to ending this quagmire. A man and woman dressed in black burst over the 9-foot White House spiked fence. Motion and sound sensors announced them seconds before the rooftop Secret Service emergency response team scoped them with 9mm automatic machine guns. Their attack was slowed by their heavy coats, helmets, and confusion. Floodlights and alarms pierced the vehicular buzz as they cleared the first 100 yards. The man slid on the grassy dew and regained the grip of his backpack. A dozen Secret Service agents, armed with Sig Sauer automatic handguns, fantailed from the White House and underground bunkers as the attackers penetrated the inner perimeter. The homeless man jumped like a startled rabbit. Bad timing for him. Perfect timing for the attackers. An armored Marine helicopter, a Secret Service counterpart, and 3 drones turned the scene into 12 o'clock high noon. The 2 people jumped up and stared out wildly at the homeless man and his neighboring assassins, all the while continuing to run in midair as if they had been in freeze frame. Almost 7 weeks earlier in Stanford University, Professor Julius Mentor, dressed in geek wear, including an oversized checked shirt pushed into high-cut yellow-brown polyester pants, was standing behind a wooden lectern looking intently out at his jam-packed political science class. Every seat was taken. Students with clipboards and smartphones crowded the aisles and back wall to record the talk. Outside the lecture hall and standing in front of 2 monitors were dozens of students looking fixedly at the young, already